You ever wonder why the ones who ran, the ones who swore they'd never return, somehow find their way back? Why the very person who pushed love away, who claimed they didn't need you, ends up circling back into your life as if something inside them couldn't fully let go? It's not an accident. It's not weakness. It's the power of emotional truth. See, there's a law that governs human connection, deeper than logic, deeper than fear, the law of emotional imprint. When you touch someone's soul with authenticity, when you love them without agenda, you become part of their internal world. They can run from your presence, but they can't run from the reflection you awakened inside them. That reflection follows them in silence. It whispers in the quiet moments when no one else is around. It reminds them of who they were when they were with you. Raw, alive, real. Avoidants crave control because control feels like safety. But love, true love, is not about control, it's about surrender. And hat terrifies them. They pull away not because you did something wrong, but because love exposes the cracks in their armor. It asks them to face the parts of themselves they've spent years hiding from. They think distance will protect them from that pain, but all distance does is amplify what's missing. There comes a moment, a sacred breaking point, when the silence becomes too loud, when freedom begins to taste like emptiness, when their independence feels more like isolation, and in that space, the memory of you becomes a light, not because you chased them, not because you begged them to return, but because you represented something pure, connection without control, presence without pressure. They come back not to reclaim what was lost, but to remember who they were when they were with you. Because you didn't just offer love, you offered growth. You saw through their defenses, not with judgment, but with compassion. And whether they admit it or not, that kind of energy transforms people. It lingers. It heals. Sometimes life separates two souls so they can evolve into the versions of themselves that can finally meet without fear. The universe doesn't deal in punishment. It deals in preparation. The avoidance, the distance, the silence, they were all part of a divine recalibration. Because when both hearts are ready, even the most resistant one will find its way home. So if you're listening to this right now and your heart aches because someone you love pulled away, don't let your power dissolve into their absence. The energy that made them fall for you in the first place wasn't your chase. It was your wholeness. It was your peace. It was your willingness to love while staying rooted in your own worth. That's the kind of energy that can't be forgotten, can't be replicated, and can't be replaced. They may swear they'll never return, but when truth calls them back, it's not because of you. It's because something inside them finally woke up, and that's the bow tie of love that's real. It doesn't demand, it doesn't chase, it simply is, powerful enough to echo through time, to soften fear, and to call even the most guarded heart back to its truth. Because in the end, every avoidant learns this one divine truth: you can run from a person, but you can't outrun the lesson they gave your soul. Every human being carries emotional imprints, deep markings on the heart that no amount of logic, distraction, or distance can erase. For the avoidant, these imprints are especially powerful because they are often the first real moments where their walls cracked and their soul was seen. You might think they left because they didn't care, but the truth is, they left because they cared more than they knew how to handle. When someone who's built their life around emotional control meets a person who touches something raw inside them, that moment becomes a collision between fear and truth always leaves a mark. Avoidants operate through a nervous cyst. Conditioned to associate closeness with danger. Somewhere in their history, love became unpredictable. Connection meant losing control. So when someone shows them consistency, warmth, and presence, it disarms them. It doesn't make sense to their survival brain. How can love feel safe and uncomfortable at the same time? They don't yet understand that the discomfort is not danger, it's growth. But their instinct tells them to retreat. To them, distance equals safety, even though that safety costs them the very thing they crave most: connection. What they don't realize in those moments of withdrawal is that the body keeps score. Every moment of intimacy, every spark of truth, every moment they felt seen despite their defenses, it all becomes encoded. Even when they walk away, their nervous system remembers. That's why months later, sometimes years later, something triggers the memory. A song, a scent, a familiar tone of voice. And suddenly, they feel something they thought they'd buried. That's the emotional imprint resurfacing. It's not nostalgia. It's unfinished energy. Love that never found closure because it was too real to simply disappear. Think about it. We remember the people who made us feel something profound, not the ones who played it safe. The avoidant may distract themselves, bury themselves in work, new relationships, or solitude, but deep within, there's a quiet ache they can't quite define. It's the echo of the connection that pierced through their armor. You represented truth in a world built on their self-protection. You made them feel known, and once a soul has been seen, it can't unsee itself. That's why they circle back, not always physically, but energetically, because that imprint keeps pulling them toward what felt most real. Love leaves residue, and real love, the kind that meets the soul, doesn't vanish when the body walks away. The avoidant might tell themselves they've moved on, that they've outgrown you, that they're better off alone. But the human heart doesn't operate on logic. It operates on experience, emotion, and meaning. And when someone touches their emotional core, that connection becomes a part of their identity. It challenges their belief that they're safer alone. It whispers that maybe they're capable of more than withdrawal. Maybe they're capable of love that doesn't threaten their freedom. Over time, avoidance becomes exhausting. It's a cycle of running from ghosts that live inside their own chest. And those ghosts, they wear your face. Because when they left, they didn't just leave you. They left a part of themselves that only existed in your presence. They try to replace that feeling, but replicas never satisfy the soul. That's why they come back. Not to repeat the past, but to reconcile with it. To understand what that emotional imprint meant. To see if the version of themselves they became with you still exists somewhere within them. The secret they never tell you is that they never truly forget. They may silence the urge to reach out, but they replay the moments in their mind. They may resist vulnerability, but they crave the peace it brought. Because emotional imprints are sacred teachers, they show us what our soul recognizes as truth. For the avoidant, that truth is terrifying and magnetic all at once. It's the reason they keep orbiting around you, even when they swear they've moved on. It's the pull of something unfinished, not between you and them, but between them and the love they once feared to fully receive. The human heart learns through contrast. It needs to experience both light and shadow to truly understand what it values. For the avoidant, this contrast is the very force that awakens their realization. When they are in a relationship with someone who offers love, depth, and emotional availability, they often feel overwhelmed. That level of intimacy exposes them. It reveals the parts of themselves they've kept hidden, the soft, unguarded places they swore no one would ever touch again. So they pull away, telling themselves they need space, freedom, or clarity. But what they're really searching for is relief from the intensity of being seen. They believe distance will calm the storm inside them. What they don't realize is that distance doesn't soothe it. It amplifies it. When they leave, they step into a world that feels easier. A world where no one expects them to open up, where emotions can stay buried under routine and control. At first, this feels like freedom. They convince themselves they made the right choice. They tell themselves they're finally at peace. But soon, a quiet emptiness begins to echo in that space. The laughter they share doesn't sound the same when no one's around to share it. The silence they once craved becomes deafening. The independence they celebrated starts to feel like exile. This is the law of contrast in motion, the divine teaching that we can only appreciate warmth after we've tasted cold. The avoidant must experience the void created by their own withdrawal to understand what they truly lost. Because when you offered love, consistency, and presence, they couldn't see it for what it was. Their nervous system, conditioned to equate closeness with pain, translated your affection as pressure. But in your absence, they begin to see with new eyes. They start to recognize the difference between control and peace, between solitude and loneliness, between freedom and emotional starvation. They might find new distractions, a rebound, new hobbies, endless scrolling, a renewed focus on goals, anything to avoid the silence that reveals truth. Yet deep down, the contrast grows stronger. The temporary comfort of detachment begins to lose its taste. The thrill of independence fades into monotony. They start to miss the feeling of being understood, of being known without having to explain. That's the paradox. They crave the very intimacy they once ran from. Free, and it's not because you were perfect. It's because in your presence, they encountered something authentic. You became a mirror that reflected both their beauty and their wounds. You made them feel alive, but aliveness comes with risk, and they weren't ready to handle that risk. But when life shows them the contrast, the emptiness of relationships without depth, the hollowness of achievements without connection, something shifts. The mind begins to understand what the heart has known all along. Safety without love is not safety at all. It's isolation, wearing the mask of control. This realization doesn't come overnight. It's subtle, like a whisper in the dark. It comes when they see a couple laughing genuinely and remember what that felt like. It comes when they accomplish something great and realize there's no one to share it with. It comes when they lie awake, not missing you as a person necessarily, but missing the feeling of being truly seen. That's the law of contrast revealing its wisdom, showing them that the absence of love is not peace. It's emptiness disguised as strength. Eventually, that contrast leads them back. Not always with words, sometimes just with presence, because the soul will always seek balance. And when they've lived long enough in the emptiness, they start to crave the connection they once rejected. The human spirit can't survive on control alone. It needs communion, warmth, and emotional truth. That's why avoidants often return. They don't come back because they suddenly need you. They come back because the silence showed them what their fear cost them. It showed them that the very thing they ran from was the thing they were always longing for. The contrast between isolation and connection becomes the teacher that breaks their illusion of freedom, revealing that what they truly wanted was never distance, but peace within closeness. Love has a way of turning into a mirror, especially for those who spend their lives trying to avoid their reflection. The avoidant spends years building walls, carefully designed defenses meant to keep pain out. But those same walls keep truth out as well. When someone comes along who sees through those walls with compassion instead of criticism, something sacred happens. That person becomes a mirror, not just reflecting who the avoidant pretends to be, but who they truly are underneath the fear. That mirror becomes impossible to forget. It's not because of obsession or dependency. It's because they finally saw themselves through someone else's eyes, and what they saw was both terrifying and beautiful. When you loved an avoidant, you didn't just love their surface, you loved their potential. You loved the parts of them that even they were afraid to acknowledge. And that's what love does. It doesn't just connect two people, it reveals the truth hiding beneath the armor. For someone who has spent a lifetime believing they're too much, too broken, or too unlovable, being seen without judgment is disarming. It's like lie pouring into a dark room they'd long stopped visiting. At first, they resist it. They may even push it away because it threatens their identity as the strong, self-reliant one who doesn't need anyone. But after the connection is gone, the memory of that reflection lingers. They can't unsee it. That's why they think about you even when they've convinced themselves they've moved on. Because what you represented was not just love, it was awareness. You became a reflection of the version of themselves they were too afraid to become. You showed them they could feel deeply and not fall apart. You proved that vulnerability didn't have to mean weakness. You were the evidence that love could exist without control. And while they might have rejected you in the moment, they can't reject the lesson your love left behind. Every human being has two selves, the one they show the world and the one they bury within. The avoidant hides their inner self under layers of logic, detachment, and independence. But love exposes it. When you looked at them, you didn't see a fortress, you saw a person, scared but capable of love. And that gaze, that unconditional presence, becomes etched in their memory. They begin to associate you with a feeling they can't replicate anywhere else. That's not because you're irreplaceable in a romantic sense, but because the mirror you held up was unique. You didn't just reflect their habits or flaws, you reflected their soul. In your absence, they look for that reflection again. They seek it in new partners, in solitude, in success, but it's never the same, because the mirror you offered was not one of judgment, but of possibility. You saw them as already whole, already worthy, already capable of connection. That image contradicts everything their fear has told them for years, and so, even if they try to suppress it, their mind revisits it. Their heart replays the moments when they felt both terrified and alive, moments where they glimpsed what it company. ULD mean to be fully open. You. That's why love leaves a lasting imprint on avoidance. It's not just about chemistry or attachment, it's about identity. When they were with you, they became a version of themselves they didn't know existed. Open, soft, courageous. And even though it scared them enough to run, that version of themselves still calls out from within. They might try to silence it, but they can't erase it. You were not just a person to them. You were a mirror of what's possible when they stop running. Eventually, that mirror becomes a point of reckoning. They may come back not because they're chasing comfort, but because they want to reconcile with that reflection. They want to understand the part of themselves that was capable of feeling safe in love. They realize that avoiding you was never about you. It was about avoiding that truth. Because once someone has seen their soul through the eyes of another, every future relationship, every silence, every attempt at distance become. That's a comparison to that moment of recognition. You became a mirror of their potential, and no matter how far they go, they'll always feel its pull. Every soul is born with an inherent pull toward growth, even when that growth terrifies us. For the avoidant, this truth is buried beneath layers of conditioning, fear, and emotional protection. They don't reject love because they don't want it. They reject it because love is the one force powerful enough to awaken their dormant pain. And deep inside, every human being, even the most distant avoidant, carries an instinct to heal. That instinct might be quiet, even invisible for years, but it's there, pulling them toward experiences and people that will stretch them beyond their comfort zone. You were one of those experiences. You were not just another relationship. You were a catalyst. When someone with an avoidant pattern meets a love that feels genuine, it activates something ancient in them, the desire to be whole again. They may not have the language for it, and they may not even recognize it consciously, but their soul does. On a spiritual level, love is a mirror that exposes the disconnection between who we are and who we were meant to be. For the avoidant, that mirror can feel unbearable at first. It confronts them with their avoidance, their fear, their longing. It forces them to see the walls they've built and the life they've designed around those walls. The easy thing to do is to run, and they do. But what they're really running from isn't you, it's their own awakening. Avoidants are not cold-hearted. In fact, many of them feel things more deeply than they let on. Their fear of vulnerability isn't a lack of care, it's a defense against the potential flood of emotion that love brings. But love, especially love rooted in patience and authenticity, has a way of finding the cracks in even the strongest armor. It whispers to their soul that there's something more than survival. There's transformation. And transformation always begins with discomfort. The soul's craving for growth doesn't vanish just because the mind resists it. Even as they pull away, something within them is changing. They start to feel the emptiness of emotional distance. They begin to sense that their pattern of withdrawing might be keeping them safe, but it's also keeping them small. That awareness might not bring them running back immediately, but it plants a seed. It's a seed that will grow quietly, watered by life experiences that echo the lessons they resisted learning with you. They will try to move on. They'll tell themselves they're free now, unburdened. But freedom without depth eventually turns hollow. The more they try to escape their emotions, the louder the craving for meaning becomes. This is the soul's design. It doesn't settle for comfort when it was created for expansion. And no matter how many times they run, life will keep presenting them with situations that mirror the lesson of vulnerability they on. Resisted. They'll find themselves facing the same emotions, the same longing, the same ache to connect. Only this time, they'll be more aware, more open, more ready. That's why, so often, they circle back. Not necessarily because they miss you in the surface level sense, but because their soul recognizes that something about you called them higher. You were not there to complete them. You were there to awaken them. And sometimes awakening hurts. It shakes the foundation of who they think they are. But eventually that pain becomes purpose. They start to see that love isn't the enemy, fear is. They begin to understand that connection doesn't trap them. It frees them from the prison of isolation they built long ago. So when an avoidant comes back, it's not just nostalgia, it's evolution. It's their soul acknowledging that the very love they resisted was the medicine they needed. You represented growth, not comfort, and the soul will always be drawn back to where it began to awaken. Because no matter how far they run, the truth remains. Their avoidance was never the end of the story. It was the beginning of their transformation. And deep down, every avoidant knows that the path back to themselves will always lead through the heart they once tried to escape. Avoidants live their lives believing that control equals safety. They've spent years mastering the art of detachment, keeping their emotions in check, keeping people at arm's length, convincing themselves that if they can just manage everything from a distance, they'll never get hurt again. But what they don't realize is that this need for control is a cage disguised as freedom. It gives the illusion of power, but it quietly steals their ability to connect, to feel, to live fully. The moment love enters their life, it exposes this illusion. It shows them that no matter how tightly they grip the steering wheel, they can't control the tides of emotion that come with genuine connection. That realization terrifies them, and that's when they pull away. A retreat, thinking that distance will restore their sense of order. They tell themselves they need space to find themselves. But what they're really trying to find is control again. Control over feelings that love awakened and fear couldn't contain. They step back into their solitude like it's a sanctuary. But over time, that sanctuary begins to feel more like a prison. The silence that once brought comfort starts to echo with the weight of what's missing. And deep down, something begins to shift. They start to see that what they thought was safety was actually self-imposed limitation. Love threatens the avoidant not because it's unsafe, but because it demands surrender. And surrender is something their ego can't stand. It's not surrender to another person, but surrender to emotion, to truth, to connection that can't be predicted or managed. Love says, let go, and their fear screams, hold on tighter. Yet the either they hold on to control, the emptier their life becomes. They might succeed in avoiding heartbreak, but they also avoid the fullness of life. Joy, passion, intimacy, meaning. The illusion of control shields them from pain, yes, but it also shields them from purpose. And eventually, that illusion breaks. Maybe it happens slowly, in the quiet moments when no one's around. Or maybe it happens suddenly, when they realize the world they've built to protect themselves has no warmth left in it. They might look around and see that they've kept everything neat, everything stable, but everything is lifeless. That's when the truth hits. Control without connection is emptiness. Freedom without love is loneliness. Independence without intimacy is survival, not living. This moment of realization is powerful because it's the beginning of awakening. It's the moment when they start questioning everything they've built their identity on. They begin to see that their fear of losing control has cost them the very thing they wanted most. Closeness without fear. They begin to understand that the walls they built to keep love out also kept joy out. That the emotional distance they believed made them strong actually made them numb. And that realization humbles them. It softens them. The breaking of that illusion doesn't happen all at once. It happens piece by piece as they confront the truth that life is not meant to be managed. It's meant to be experienced. Love is not a threat. It's a teacher. It doesn't demand they lose themselves. It invites them to find their truest self, the one that exists beyond the armor, the one who doesn't need to control everything to feel safe, because they have learned that safety isn't found in walls. It's found in trust. When an avoidant begins to see this, something inside them calls them back, not just to you, but to life itself. They return to the places and people that reminded them of what it means to feel. They come back not because they're weak, but because they're finally brave enough to admit that love was never the enemy. Their illusion of control was. And when that illusion shatters, they're free for the first time, free to connect, free to love, free to surrender without losing themselves, because they finally understand that real power doesn't come from control. It comes from the courage to let go and trust the heart they've spent a lifetime running from. There are moments in life when separation isn't punishment. It's divine timing at work. When an avoidant walks away, it feels final. They swear they'll never return, never look back, never need anyone again. But life has a way of humbling even the most guarded heart. What they don't understand at first is that distance is not always destruction. Sometimes it's sacred space, the kind of space the universe creates to do the work neither person could do together. In that space, clarity is born. Growth takes root, and healing begins to unfold in ways that only time and solitude can orchestrate. Divine timing operates beyond ego. It doesn't rush. It doesn't negotiate. It moves according to the lessons both souls need to learn. When the avoidant leaves, it might seem like rejection, but it's often a necessary pause. It's the universe saying, you're not ready yet, not to love, not to be seen, not to sustain what you've found. And as painful as that realization can be, it carries a hidden wisdom. Sometimes people must lose what's real to recognize what's sacred. The avoidant must confront the silence they once craved to understand that solitude without connection isn't peace. It's avoidance dressed as safety. In that silence, life becomes the teacher. Every experience they encounter, every fleeting distraction, every new face, every quiet night alone, starts reflecting back the truth they tried to escape. They begin to see the difference between escape and evolution. Escape is temporary, evolution is inevitable. At first, they resist it. They dive deeper into their independence, their goals, their distractions. But the soul doesn't let go so easily. The pull of divine timing is relentless. It keeps guiding them back to the lessons they left unfinished, the emotions they refused to feel, the person they ran from, including themselves. This is how divine timing works. It breaks the ego so the heart can open. It separates what's shallow from what's real. It forces the avoidant to sit with the emptiness until they realize the truth, that love wasn't the problem, fear was. And until they confront that fear, they'll keep finding themselves in the same cycles, with different faces, repeating the same emotional pattern. The universe doesn't punish, it patterns. It presents the same lesson until the soul chooses differently. Eventually, the time comes when the lesson lands. It might happen years later, triggered by something small, a familiar voice, a memory, a moment of stillness that suddenly brings everything back. In that instant, they see it clearly. They didn't run from you because you were wrong for them. They ran because you were the mirror of everything right, the reflection of what they were afraid to receive. And now that they've grown, the energy between you shifts. What once felt overwhelming now feels possible. What once felt threatening now feels safe. That's when divine timing does what ego could never do. It brings two people back into alignment, not from desperation, but from evolution. It's important to understand that divine timing doesn't always mean reconciliation in the romantic sense. Sometimes it brings closure, sometimes it brings friendship, and sometimes it brings peace within oneself. But in every case, it restores balance. The same force that once pulled you apart now brings understanding, forgiveness, and emotional maturity. The avoidant, in their journey away and back, learns that running was never freedom, it was delay. True freedom is being able to love without losing on. Self, to connect without fear, and to stay without feeling trapped. So when they return, it's not coincidence, it's not weakness. Their own unmet fears. And the people who love them, those who choose compassion over bitterness, presence over chasing, become the silent healers in their evolution. The truth is, when love is real, it doesn't vanish. It transforms, it teaches. It shapes both souls involved into something wiser, softer, more divine. The secret reason avoidants come back even when they swear they won't isn't because of regret or loneliness. It's because love, once genuine, leaves an eternal imprint on the soul. It awakens something they can't unfeel, something that calls them back not just to you, but to the part of themselves they lost in fear. That return isn't about recreating the past. It's about remembering who they truly are, a soul designed not for control but for connection, and for you, the one who loved deeply, who stayed patient, who learned to let go without resentment. This, too, was your awakening. You discovered your strength in surrender, your power in peace, your worth in staying true to your heart. That's the kind of love that changes lives, the kind that doesn't demand, but inspires, the kind that doesn't chase, but radiates. Because real love doesn't imprison, it liberates. It transforms both the giver and the receiver into higher versions of themselves. So as you walk away from this message, carry this truth with you. Every connection has purpose, every distance has meaning, and every return, whether it's physical or spiritual, is a divine reminder that love is the ultimate teacher. Trust the timing, trust the process, and never stop believing in the kind of love that evolves through courage and compassion. Because when love is pure, it never truly ends. It only deepens in ways the mind can't measure, but the heart always knows. Thank you for taking this journey, for listening, for feeling, for allowing truth to reach you. If these words touched something within you, it's because that part of you is ready to rise. Remember, you are not here to ease what left. You are here to become what love was trying to show you all along. Stay open, stay grounded, stay faithful to your growth. Because the love you give, when rooted in truth, always finds its way back in one form or another. Thank you for your time, your energy, and your willingness to expand. You are loved, you are guided, and you are exactly where you need to be. Until next time, stay strong, stay open, and never stop becoming more of who you truly are.